Hazard pay is heating up, baby. Hazard pay is in the third stimulus package. Hazard pay is calculated as $10,000 based upon a $13 an hour calculation. $13 an hour times the number of hours you worked during the pandemic from January to 60 days after the pandemic's over. But how do you get hazard pay? Who applies for it? Who's an essential worker? Enjoy this overnight LALATE video explaining how to get hazard pay. How soon could you get your hazard pay after a second stimulus package deal is reached? Hey, good afternoon, everybody. This is LALATE with your second stimulus check update for LALATE afternoons. Hope you're great and safe. This one's about hazard pay every day at 4 o'clock. Our afternoons LALATE always starts at 3:30 with the check, then goes to hazard pay at 4, FPUC at 4:30, and finally at 5 o'clock, rent assistance. Boy, we have big news about hazard pay. Big news after Nancy and Mitch went on a war of words early in the morning. It was something to really wake up at. If you're eating your breakfast, hopefully it went down okay because it was heated. Let's get right to it. A lot of the questions I've seen overnight are people asking me, how soon could I get my hazard pay? And will I get my hazard pay next week? No. What I need to express to you is that hazard pay is going to be one of those items that I'm going to be with you for a while. I'm not leaving you after this bill's passed. I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying here. And especially for hazard pay, because I'm not just predicting it. I know that hazard pay is going to be an interesting path going forward. Is it going to be passed? And then when would you get your money? Let me get right to that right now. Now, overnight, there were more indications about what is holding up the second stimulus package, what is approved, and what is clearly not approved so far. In those three categories, hazard pay is in the I don't know section. With more indications, it is clearly not approved yet, but is clearly also not in the not approved. What's going on? Nancy Pelosi on this morning appeared on CNBC. It's the morning business show Squawk on the Street, and was interviewed by Jim Cramer. Her interview came minutes after Mitch McConnell, and during one period of questioning, she went off tangent and was unresponsive to the question and started talking about hazard pay workers. She didn't use the word hazard pay, but she used all the types of people who are delineated in hazard pay. Why do we know that? Because I've done the videos for you, you've watched them, and I've gone through the categories of the hazard pay provision of the second stimulus package, where it delineates who are the essential workers. You remember that? Where I sat back and I read, and I'm like, okay, provision 1, C, subsection 5, and it said janitorial services. I had the line about the dentists, how they have their own provision. Remember that, those videos? So Nancy literally, almost verbatim, quoted the section of the hazard pay provision for determining eligible essential workers in her question to answering Jim Cramer. It was so reassuring. It was that broadcast primetime, Thursday morning interview in which she talked about the essential workers. And so it suggests to us that hazard pay is not going to go by the wayside. B, Nancy Pelosi is not going to give up hazard pay. C, it is highly likely that the hazard pay is going to get approved. Now, it is clearly not in the approval list because we don't have confirmation it's been approved, but it's clearly not in the disapproval list because Nancy Pelosi is literally arguing for it this Thursday morning. What we also have on the other side is this. Mitch McConnell, who I have to qualify before I get to his comments. Mitch McConnell is not in the negotiations. He's never been invited to the negotiations. He's that guy outside the club that's not invited. He's like that Real Housewife that's not invited to that Thursday dinner date from hell. And it's like, why didn't you invite me to the party? Well, I just don't invite you to the party. So he was interviewed about the negotiations, which he's not in. Yeah, complained to CNBC's producer about who they're booking for interviews. Rather than interview Steve Mnuchin or Mark Meadows, who are in the room, they interview Mitch McConnell. And he said this. And he said the negotiations, which he's not a party to or not in the room for, are currently $1 trillion apart. Now you think about that and it causes you to wonder, well, wait a second. The Republican proposal, which is not going to ever become law because it's not, both sides have agreed that it's not on track to being introduced anywhere. It's just a negotiation document at this point. Is $1 trillion. The White House wanted $2 trillion, but never reduced it to a writing. And the Democrats proposed $3 trillion. So for Mitch to sit on Thursday morning news and say the parties are $1 trillion apart is very confusing, because it means that either he doesn't know his numbers, or somehow these deals have contracted from a $2 trillion separation to a $1 trillion separation. Has that money been digressed or reduced from hazard pay? Has hazard pay been reduced from the $10,000 owed to you under a hazard pay bill to a lower sum of money? I don't know. What I do know is that Broadcast News still today, yet again, did not ask Nancy or Chuck about, Nancy or Mitch about hazard pay. I tweeted them. I'm like, Jim, ask them about hazard pay. I tweeted Carl Quintanilla, who I thought was going to do the interview, and I tweeted, CNBC Squawk Box. I'm like, hey, ask them about hazard pay. Of course, they did not. So where are we? What's interesting is that there have been some concessions that are clearly, related to hazard pay and may suggest the mood in the room. First of all, there have been concessions to give PPP money, another round of PPP loan money. Nancy allegedly has agreed to offer another round of PPP loan money after the Democrats' proposal. The HEROES Act did not have PPP lending in it, this second stimulus package. The Republicans wanted PPP and she gave it to them. On the other hand, just this morning, Mitch McConnell on CNBC again hit the ground, pounding his feet, urging for insurance liability provisions, which, as you know, is the anti-hazard pay bill. It's anti because it says employees must get to work, employees must work, and tough luck if the place of work is hazardous because you can't sue anyone. We know that part has not become law, has not become agreed upon. It is clearly not a provision that is agreed upon. And ultimately, if that's not agreed upon, is that impacting hazard pay? It suggests the Republicans are still pushing back on hazard pay if they're still pushing for employees' inability to sue their employer for a safe work environment. What's interesting is that Nancy delineated all those individuals who are essential workers in her interview with Jim Cramer. But all that Mitch could talk about were the employers. All that he could talk about were going to lunch and writing off tax deductions for going to lunch, airlines getting bailouts, travel bonuses, big businesses, big bailouts, and nothing about frontline workers. What's very confusing is that Mitch also confirmed that he does not have support from most of his colleagues in his party in the Senate. And ironically, he confirmed that it's on both directions, that they support the Democratic plan, a lot of them, and some of them don't even support any stimulus package. The numbers are overwhelming, though. Most Republicans who are up for re-election in the coming quick few weeks all have urged for this second stimulus package, which has hazard pay in it, to be passed. Because the minute that Saturday morning rolls around, if there is no second stimulus package agreement, they have now indicated they're not getting on the plane and going back home. Because going back home is setting up their campaign re-election stomping points and campaign stops. And they said they're not going home without a deal because they say we won't be re-elected. It's ironic that Mitch's own group have told them, get the damn deal done, Mitch, because we're not going to get re-elected if you don't make a deal. Marco Rubio has indicated that as well. I don't know if he's up for re-election, but he indicated that the deal has to be reached. He said that the stimulus packages are too far apart in sums of money delegated. This, where the big money's in the stimulus package as well. You know, hazard pay is one of the big amounts of money. But he says the deal has to be reached by Friday. Marco Rubio has talked about making a deal, but yet once again he talked about big businesses. So where are we, LALATE? Will hazard pay land in my bank account, and when will it land in my bank account? Someone asked me, am I getting $10,000 next week? Okay, so here we go with this part of the video. Let me explain where hazard pay is going. If the bill becomes law, you know, in the next few days, and hazard pay is in there, do you get hazard pay the day it becomes law? No. You get hazard pay in a week? No. Do you get hazard pay when the stimulus check for $1,200 is sent to you? No. When do I get this darn hazard pay? Hazard pay is one of those provisions that allocates a lot of money to you, but it also does not allocate as smooth sailing. And I'm going to be very frank. There's no sugarcoating about this. I'm going to give you the good and the bad and the ugly. And the ugly is that the hazard pay path to getting the money in your pocket is going to be it rhymes with Mitch and it starts with a B. It's going to be like that because there's going to be employers who won't apply for it. There's going to be employers who say you aren't essential when the law says you're essential. There's going to be employers who have gone bankrupt, who have shut their doors down, who employed you as an essential worker, and now you're like, well, wait a second, they're supposed to apply for me and they don't exist. How am I going to apply for me? There are going to be employers who say, I don't care, and then there's going to be employees who are going to get together, as I vowed you to do, and say to the employer, you know what, you don't pay us, we're walking off the workforce. And Nancy Pelosi said that this morning. She said that if you don't pay people, they're just not going to come back to work. And she was referring to a hazardous environment. We hear from American working families. 3 months ago, we passed our legislation, what the majority leader would call a liberal wish list. He's referring to Mitch McConnell. It's about families who cannot pay rent. Over 20 consecutive weeks of 1 million unemployment numbers. And still they're not facing the reality. We have to contain and defeat the virus with a scientific approach to deal with the viruses. We want our children in our schools and our parents want them to learn. We want our parents earning and our children learning, but we can't do that at the risk of our teachers. Risk, hazard pay. It has to relate to the infection rate of the community. It has to be a calculation for that, but there's a different rate of infection. Can the president do hazard pay by executive order? No, and he's not going to. So when Kentucky Republican leader Mitch McConnell says this, everyone rolls their eyes like that. Exactly when the deal comes together, I can't tell you, but I think it'll be some point in the near future. Mitch, you know everyone's up for re-election in just a few weeks. What do you mean near future? The argument is over how much aid is appropriate at this appropriate juncture. You know, that story doesn't work anymore, Mitch. You did that in May. In May, you said that you didn't have enough economic data. Remember my videos back in May? I mean, I was a smaller channel then. This channel, you know, has grown enormously. But in May, I did a lot of videos where Mitch kept on saying, he didn't say we, he said I don't have enough economic data. At that point, we were, you know, at 10 weeks of 1 million unemployment claims per week. We were at that point of, 10 to 20 million evictions being filed across the country. At that point, we had, rampant unemployment, tons of businesses shutting down, PPP money running out, and he had no economic data. So here we are in August. We're at the financial cliff. We're either falling over the financial cliff or we're crashing into the water under the financial cliff. And he says, we're not sure how much aid we need at this particular juncture. When do you know anything, Mitch? It's time to know something, Mitch. If you don't, then wake up. Nancy says, if people have jobs, everything is better. If we have a scientific approach, everything is better. And then she had these remarks. These remarks were the hazard pay remarks. It gave so much spirit and energy and positivity to all the viewers of this channel who daily tune in at 4 o'clock just for hazard pay. And I know you very well. She said healthcare, sanitation, transportation, who are employed by state and local government. If they get to have their way, what money are we saving if we're not paying these people? They will lose their jobs. Suddenly, the Republicans are deficit hawks. Senators and governments are appealing for help. She said, we have to pay these people. When asked of whether there will be social unrest if you don't compensate hazard pay people, without using the word hazard pay, she said yes. The picture is bleak. This is why we must pass the bill we did 3 months ago while Mr. McConnell pressed the pause button. It shows the differences. We put working families first. We put how much testing should be done. It doesn't cost anymore. If you have that, then you can open the schools. You can test for people every week. You have to have comprehensive testing, which leads to transitioning and treatment. Which is really interesting because that's all hazard pay. That's all testing of people in a hazardous environment. But it's hard to deal with this is Nancy continue again, with someone who wants to give a tax break for fancy lunches when the rest of Americans go hungry. Coming up next is FPUC. Wow. Big developments on FPUC, our third video on Afternoons LA. Stay with me, stay motivated, stay positive, stay focused, and as always, stay with LA for more.